You know, I wasn't always who I am now. This moment explains why. Come, let me let you into my life. Come in. Let's talk about 3 moments that taught me no one was gonna come save me. Let me take you back to my childhood. This chapter we're gonna call trauma. Growing up as a child, we're often faced with situations out of our control. We are put in environments that we don't choose, and we are told that we are too young to understand. But today we're going to touch the topic about logic versus emotion, mind versus heart. When I was a child, I was put in an environment of domestic violence. I was raised in a home where my father would hurt my mother. But because I was such a young child, they always said, oh, he's too young to understand. But even though that might have been true, I wasn't too young to feel. And that's where we're often instilled bad habits or bad coping mechanisms. I learned at a very young age that because I didn't understand, it was okay not to feel. So I learned to suppress and move on. With that, silence became my shield. I learned that if I stayed quiet and nobody knew what I was feeling, I could pretend it wasn't happening. That also instilled the trauma of if love doesn't hurt, it can't be real. That takes us to move forward a couple years, or a little over a decade, I should say, to the 19-year-old version of me. This chapter we'll call abandonment. As I got older, I had these coping mechanisms of suppressing emotion and moving on. For a long time, I just was kind of like a racehorse, you know? Keep going past everything that was happening bad in my life. So it was very exhausting, you know? And I got to an age where I was 19 and I experienced my parents' divorce. Not my biological father, but my stepfather. Their story is not mine to tell, so I won't give too much detail. But the point is, the separation happened, and I was still a child, even though legally I was an adult. I still depended on my parents. I was a student, I was working part-time, I was trying to be the adult everyone expects us to be. In the midst of that transition of my teens to my adulthood, I had to deal with a separation. That meant that my father, my stepdad, left the household, and my mother and I were left to take on, the household responsibilities. And then shortly after that, my mother was also gone. She ended up embarking in a new relationship and went forward with that, not really paying mind of what was being left behind, which was 19-year-old me with the household to take care of. So I had to stop school and focus more on working so I could pay the rent, so I could pay the bills, so I could survive. So I lost 2 very important people in this chapter in my life, and it was traumatizing. It was sad. I didn't understand why this was happening to me. But because of the early teachings that I had, I learned to suppress and move on. And as sad as that sounds, it was what I thought in the moment was the best. Hey, I was a grown up, right? So then let's dive into this final moment that shaped me. This chapter is called The Boiling Point. I want to start with the metaphor. Water can only take so much heat until it boils over. As a human, we can only take so much pressure before we crack. This was my boiling point. I was going through so much since a very young age that I never stopped to ask myself how I was doing. Nobody ever took the time to check in. Everyone just assumed because I wouldn't show emotion, because silence has become my shield, that I was okay. But I wasn't. At this point in time, I was around 21 years old. It had been a couple years. A lot has happened between here and then, and I had started a new relationship, right? So at this point, I am now trying to stay up on my feet because obviously as a 19-year-old, I wasn't able to sustain a household. So I lost the apartment I was in. I was couch surfing. I was living in people's rooms. I was jumping back and forth through hoops just to stay alive, I guess, right? And at that point, my mother had came back, so I was trying to support her. She was going through a depressing stage of her own self. Again, her story, not mine to tell. But as the man of the house that I was, I had to take care of both of us. So I took on 3 jobs. I was working day and night, trying to maintain a work-life balance. And on top of that, I jumped into a relationship where he would soon become my husband. And I moved him back into town. And it was just too much to add. I wasn't okay with myself, but I didn't know it because I had learned to suppress and move on. I had learned to keep quiet, to not feel. I had learned to not show anybody how hard I had it because that was weakness, and we can't be weak, you know? And it was, again, exhausting. I didn't understand why I was going through these things, but I knew I had to be okay. But how much is too much? How far do you take it before you can't take it anymore? That's what leads me to this next part. I was going through so much that I was drinking heavily. And in one of those drunk nights, I had an episode where I locked myself in a restroom, 6-pack of beers, blacked out drunk. I don't remember this happening. This is what I've been told. But my roommate at the time opened the bathroom door, and I'm sitting there with a 6-pack in a bathtub with a knife. I didn't harm myself, but I don't know why I was in there with a knife. I don't know what caused me to get to that point. I understand now that it was just too much for a person to take on such responsibilities without choosing them, to be stuck with other people's decisions that decide for you. So in a moment of panic, my roommate calls 911, so I'm put on a hold by the authorities, and I'm put away into this mental institution. I had to sit with myself for 3 days. I knew I wasn't crazy. I knew I didn't want to end my life, but I also did know that I wanted something to end. That was the beginning of my end. Not the end of my life, but the end of a cycle. I realized that nobody was going to do the work for me unless I did. That's when I decided to choose myself. We'll dive a little bit deeper into that. But let's take a moment. I want to call this segment of this episode the 3-minute meditation moment. I know that was a lot to unpack. So wherever you are, let's pause and release a little tension. I want you to take 3 deep breaths with me. Ready? In. and out. Again, in and out. One more time, in. We're gonna push out. Let's roll our shoulders back a little bit. Feel good. Forward. Let's roll our neck a little bit side to side. Now let's raise our hands and stretch. All right. Hope that releases a little bit of that tension. So moving forward, sitting in this cell of mine, right? The physical cell of the mental cell I had been in, was putting into perspective where I was. So I chose myself. I decided to call a friend. I got out. I realized no one was going to save me. I realized I had to be my own strength. And I chose to leave California. When I did, a lot of things changed for me. We'll get into that in another episode. Let's talk a little bit more about how you can choose yourself. Sometimes you just have to say, it's okay not to be okay. It's okay to speak out and feel weak. It's okay to be vulnerable. Because showing vulnerability doesn't mean you're not going to make it. It just means that you're strong enough to choose the path that's going to redirect your life. It taught me strength and resilience. It taught me that no matter what I've been through, I have the power to rewrite my own narrative. As we wrap up this moment together, I want to leave you with a mantra. I would like for you to carry on from today and repeat to yourself, whether it's today, tonight, tomorrow, the next, or for the rest of your life. I am the author of my own strength. Try that with me. I am the author of my own strength. Carry that with you into our next episode. Thank you for joining me for a Mr. M moment. Remember to build momentum, one moment at a time.